Hi, and welcome to For This Child I Have Prayed. This is a podcast where faithful women share their journey to motherhood and how it has been marked by the goodness of God. Whether you are struggling with infertility, wrestling with postpartum, or navigating adoption, my prayer is that you are encouraged and uplifted by their testimonies of just how faithful our Creator truly is. In today's episode, Jennifer will be sharing her journey to becoming a mother that took her and her husband through infertility, loss, and postpartum struggles, and how through it all, God continued to speak to her and increase her faith. Now let's meet Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, I know you, but would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. I'm Jennifer Goins. I am a children's book author and currently a marriage coach with my husband, Jason. And we've been married 21 years. We live in the low country of South Carolina, and we now have two little girls, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and a new puppy.
Can't forget the puppy. So,
No.
little backstory. Jennifer and her husband, Jason, actually did Skippers in my premarital counseling. And through that, we've become so much more. They're our mentors. We call them our spiritual mother and father. We love them like family. And Jennifer has really spoken to my faith through my own journey to becoming a mother. And so when I knew that I wanted to start this podcast, Jennifer was the first person that I knew I would love to have on to share her story. So, Jennifer, would you like to go ahead and get started?
Sure. First, I just want to say it's an honor. So thank you so much for inviting me to be on your podcast. And it's just humbling to hear how you and Skipper have benefited from what the Lord has done in Jason's in my life. And that's why we tell our stories. It is to inspire others and to build faith and for other people to see who God is, what his character is, what his heart is. That is what we want, and we want it to glorify him. And we see that with how y'all have received what the Lord has done for us. So it's a blessing to be here.
Well, thank you. And I know your testimony, like I said, has spoken to me so much and helped me, and I know it's going to help so many other women.
If you want me to go ahead and start, I'll just start off with I mentioned earlier that Jason and I have been married for 21 years. And yet here we have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. So you can see that the numbers don't necessarily jive with having kids early on right out of marriage. And so after we got married, we were pretty much straight out of college. So we were young. I was 22 when we got married, and Jason was 24. And we both wanted to kind of get established in our careers and establish our roots as a married couple for before we went down the road of parenthood. But what happened with me is that I got very, very hung up in my career. So instead of maybe a few years into marriage, us starting a family, I didn't see it fitting in. So this whole maybe childhood idea that I thought we'd get married and have kids and all, it wasn't playing out because I was spending a lot of time in my career, which was growing a lot. And we were married in 2001 and did get pregnant in 2009. And so that 8 years into marriage, we were trying and got pregnant. But a couple weeks after we got that positive pregnancy test, I started bleeding and test heavily. So I knew something was wrong and tested again a few days later, and there was not enough of the hormone to pick up. So we were pregnant, but I miscarried early on, probably about the 7-week mark, 6 to 7 weeks. And so that was a huge disappointment back in 2009. What happened the next few years is that Jason and I went through some major marital struggles that put our relationship in a strain. So we kind of went on this emotional roller coaster after the miscarriage. And it wasn't because of the miscarriage. It was a number of factors that had built up in our relationship that we had not dealt with, that came to roost in our relationship, that caused some things. And so for a few years we were struggling in our marriage, and ultimately in 2012, so about 3 years later, we separated for 9 months and we're on the verge of divorce. Really, I was very empty inside, hopeless, depressed, and not in a very good place at all. And while we were separated, Jason, on the other hand, he was very strong in his faith, and roots in the Lord grew tremendously well, while I had not. I was raised a Christian, knew the Lord most all of my life, but didn't really live with him at the center. I can't say that our relationship was strong other than praying and going to church every day. And so when we were separated, I could feel the tug of the Lord on my heart when I was struggling, but I wasn't, listening. I was still trying to figure things out on my own. And the separation forced me into this place that was pretty miserable. I was depressed and felt very hopeless most of the time, and very unhappy. And I just knew, as I continued down this path, that it was not what the Lord had for me. It was just pressing on me. I knew that my decision making had not been glorifying to him. I knew that I was being self-centered, and just all of the things I had filled my life with, my career, material possessions, these type of things. I mean, Jason and I looked like that couple, that everyone looks to, and had everything going on the outside, but I was empty on the inside. So I've been filling my heart with all those things, and none of them were fulfilling. And it ultimately drove our marriage into the rut. My personal identity issues and that kind of thing, and the lack of a true relationship with the Lord. And so there I was. And when I finally just said, okay, God, I can't do this anymore, I decided to take myself off of the seat of my heart and put Jesus there. I mean, almost instantly, my peace and stability and security came back, even though Jason and I were still separated at the time. The Lord's presence was on me when I surrendered completely to him and said, okay, Lord, all of these wrong decisions that I've made that have led me to this place of misery, I reject and repent. And I just am going to do it your way. And it changed my life within an instant. I mean, it was literally instantaneously. After that, Jason and I, our relationship improved and we were able to reconcile. We had been living separately. We moved back in together. And that was at the end of 2012 that we reconciled, basically November, December timeframe. And by the time 2013 came along, we were like, the Lord, I mean, Jason had already grown in the Lord, and there I was in this new place without turning back. I didn't look back. I wasn't like Lot's wife and continued to look back. I knew that this was, the scales were off my eyes. I knew how to live for the Lord, and it's just in a matter of months. I mean, I was a new person instantly, and our marriage was brand new also. And so we decided to get back on track with looking to expand our family at that time. So, I mean, just starting our parenting journey was rough, but depended greatly on the Lord, because I've told you we have a 4- and 6-year-old. Those two girls would not exist if the Lord had not been faithful in coming after my heart all of those years I was struggling, and especially while we were separated. So that's an important point for people to know, is that he loves us, and he seeks us out in our lowest places, even when we're running from him and rejecting him like I was. He fought for my heart, and thankfully by his grace I accepted the invitation, again as an adult, basically recommitting my life, because the two girls that we're going to talk about, those pregnancies, they wouldn't exist if it wasn't for that.
And we're so thankful for that, and his plan is always great. I mean, who would have thought he would bring you through that journey, and bring you to the other side?
Yeah, I mean, there were many times where I was hopeless, and once I turned everything over to him, it was the opposite. So after the reconciliation, we began trying, and so that was in 2013, the beginning of the year. And a few months into that, we were able to, no, I don't have my timeline right. It wasn't a few months later. We tried, and it was slow, and we were serving in our church, and there was this ministry where we would go serve food to those in our community who were underprivileged and in need of extra food. So our Sunday school class, about once a month, I think we would go to this other local church and provide all the food and serve the community that lived around that church. Many from the local area would come, not necessarily being members of that church. They just came to partake. Okay, so we did this basically food service for these people to provide them with nourishment. And while we were there, we would always talk to everybody, pray over them, and go sit and try to get to know everybody. And one of the times when we were trying but had not been successful, we were serving at this church. And Jason went and sat down next to this man and started talking to him. And I think I was at a completely separate table. And I could tell they were getting into some interesting conversation, and I didn't know what was going on. And I was just like, and I saw the man kind of look at me and point, and Jason was nodding his head. And I was like, what in the world's going on? So after we left the that ministry that night, I asked Jason, I said, what was that man talking about? Y'all were in some interesting discussion, I could tell. And he said, well, he told me not to tell you. And I was like, what? He told you not to tell me. What are you talking about? And so it was very suspicious. And I was like, well, come on. And so I wouldn't say nagging wife, but a very persistent wife. I wouldn't let it go. And so finally Jason said, okay, I'll tell you what he said. He said, congratulations on your baby.
And at this point, you weren't pregnant and didn't have any kids.
No, we had no kids and had not been successful in our attempts yet. And that man didn't even know really that we were married. It's not like we walked up to him and said, hi, we're Jason and Jen Goins. Nice to meet you. Jason sat at his table. I sat at another table, but from a word of knowledge from the Lord, he knew that we were married trying, and he gave the word that, congratulations on your baby. And he told Jason, don't tell your wife because it's probably going to freak her out. But Jason told me anyway.
That's so funny. And just looking, so far into the future of the other words that you and I both have received. Like that was just a little seed that God planted and was like, you have no idea what's in
No
store for
idea.
you.
That's right. I mean, that was I think honestly, that's the first for sure prophetic word that we had gotten like that. I never heard anybody speak over me like that with that much confidence from the Lord. And so he said that about us. Okay. So that was in between 2013 and 2014. And we did get pregnant in 2014 again. And so we were super excited and went to the doctor, and they confirmed the pregnancy. And a couple of weeks later, I started spotting again, which was upsetting because this is what happened with my first in 2009. Now, keep in mind, this was like 4 or 5 years later. Okay, so it's not like they were back to back. But I was spotting and I got concerned. So we went back to the doctor, and they did an internal ultrasound. I don't know if that's exactly what they call it, but they examine you from the inside versus where they do the ultrasound on your stomach. It's actually they go in and do it through the cervix kind of to do the ultrasound this way early on in pregnancy, because I had been spotting, and they found the gestational sac. I got to see a picture of this gestational sac that confirmed it's not just a pregnancy test. This is an actual cellular structure that the Lord is building inside of me. And they took the blood count, for the, I think it's progesterone or whatever that they were measuring. And he gave me some, like, if I remember correctly, I think it was maybe this, oh, what was the pill? It helped keep the progesterone up. Okay. So if something was going on, it would help. He called it help the pregnancy stick. And so I was like, okay, so I was taking that orally, and he said, we're going to take your blood the next couple of days and then check the blood count of for the progesterone. And if it had decreased by X amount each day, then we would know that you're losing the pregnancy. And if it sustains or gets more, then things are okay. And so I went through that for a few days. And he called and he said the count's going down, and it was going down tremendously by the number of bouts that he had told me. And so he said, so this is not a pregnancy that you will be able to sustain. And I got very upset and sad. So we had to go through a grieving process again with that pregnancy. And so after a period of grief that I just, tried to continue to hold on to the Lord, I remember talking to Jason and saying, that man said, congratulations on your baby. He didn't say congratulations on your pregnancy. And, I was like, I do not believe that our loving God would give us a prophetic word, congratulations on your baby, that we miscarried. Because nobody congratulates you for a miscarriage.
I'm glad you brought that up because that was my question of how did you reconcile that? Like you've received this prophetic word, you have faith in that, but in the flesh, you're seeing that you just had a miscarriage. So I'm glad
Yeah.
that you touched on that.
I mean, I questioned, is this the baby from the prophetic word? But then I'm an analytical person. I was breaking down every word, and it said, congratulations on your baby. And so I was like, congratulations are not in order when you miscarry. And so that would be cruel to get that type of a word. And on your baby. And I thought, I believe that, you're a person at conception, because scripture points to the fact that God knows us before we're knit together in the womb, So that was a person, but it had not formed into an actual baby. So I'm, analyzing all the words, and I'm just saying, no, the character of the Lord, I don't believe that he would give me a prophetic word. So Jason and he agreed, and so we said that was not the pregnancy that we were being congratulated on. That was not the baby. That wasn't it. So we're going to get back on this horse again. So after, some time, when I had gotten through the grief process, we decided to try again. And we went through a year's cycle of disappointment. I mean, we had conceived successfully before. I got to see the gestational sac. There was no problem with conceiving. So I didn't think anything about going to see a fertility specialist when we had successfully conceived. And so we just kept going. I was plotting all my cycles. I was taking my temperature all the time. I was taking the right vitamins. I was reading articles. I mean, I tend on being somewhat obsessive compulsive when it comes to like knowledge seeking, because I'm a problem psycher. Maybe it's the control thing. I tend to be somebody that wants to take control. I was doing all of that the women who are listening, I'm sure you can relate. When you're going down this road, you're trying to, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, I want to take control. I'm reading about everything. I read all the articles. I'm taking the vitamins. I quit using, plastics. I quit doing all of it. I was like, I didn't drink very much. There was all of this stuff. Like, I thought, I'm getting, and so we did a year of me tracking and me doing all of that, and month in and month out, hope would rise, and those hopes would be dashed every single month, because we did not conceive, not one time during those 12 months or so that we were trying before I went to seek help. Now, I want to say this. During that time, I prayed for the mercy of the Lord to never miscarry again. I said, Lord, no more miscarriages. I don't want. I've had 2. I can't handle that. I'm begging you, please. I don't want to miscarry again. And yet we never conceived during that time. And when I look back on it, that was just a blessing, because I asked not to miscarry, and I didn't, so I didn't have, while it was up and down with the monthly cycles and the failures, there wasn't on another baby grieve that I grieved. I was grieving the idea of motherhood, but not an actual failed pregnancy again. So that was really a blessing, and a mercy of the Lord. So after that year, finally, we decided to go talk to someone, and I went to see some fertility doctors here in the Low Country. And during this time too, by the way, that I was cycling and hadn't sought any help, there was a friend of ours at church who was also trying to conceive, and she provided some scripture to help me just meditate on during the time. And one of the ones that I had been meditating on was 1 Samuel 1, the story of Hannah. Hannah was Samuel's mother, and her husband was married to another woman, so he had two wives, and the one would conceive and Hannah did not. It's kind of like Rachel and Leah, also that very similar scenario. And Hannah would just be heartbroken and disgraced because she couldn't conceive, and so she cried out to the Lord, so I believe emotionally that the people at the temple or they thought she was crazy or intoxicated, that something was wrong. But she was so heartbroken that you can imagine a woman almost wailing to the Lord, for this thing that she has asked for. And so the story, her prayer was inspiring to me, so I'd meditate on that. And then also Psalm 113:9, where it says he gives, but it's talking about the Lord. He gives the barren woman a home, making her the joyous mother of children. Praise the Lord. And I would just meditate on that. That is who he is. That's his character. That's his part. He makes the barren woman a happy mother. And that's what he did with Sarah. That's what he did with Rachel. That's what he did with Hannah. I mean, we have these examples of women who had not been able to conceive, that through the Lord's plan and just his heart and everything, he gives these women children. So it is true that he makes the barren woman the mother of children. And so I would meditate on that. And so we finally went to a fertility doctor in the spring of 2015, and I found out that I had a fibroid. And that, basically is that mound of tissue, growing almost like a tumor. And it was inside my womb. And so I had to have it surgically removed. And so we scheduled in the spring of 2015 surgery to get that fibroid removed. And I remember waking up from the surgery and my doctor said, "You do know that now you'll have to have C-sections." And I was like, "No, you didn't tell me that beforehand. That would have been information that would have been useful." But since I really couldn't conceive successfully, prior to the surgery, regardless, I would have made, I'm sure, the same decision to have the surgery. But what they took was a golf ball sized fibroid from my womb. So we just assume that was, one of the major obstacles to our not conceiving, but carrying a pregnancy. It was taking up all the space. And so most all of my other health checks that they did with the fertility, they came out okay. They did put me on thyroid medication because there are certain numbers that your thyroid, just any person, there are lab ranges that your doctor would assume your thyroid needs to function properly in. But what I learned through this process is, for purposes of fertility, it's even tighter windows. So like whatever the normal functioning thyroid numbers are, they're different when you're looking at functioning for fertility. So mine was not, the numbers weren't quite good enough. So they put me on thyroid medication to help with my fertility. And so after the surgery, I was given a few months to recover, and I was able to, take those months to heal and everything. And I think in the fall of 2015, we were able to start trying again. And we did, but we were not successful the first time or two. And what I noticed was that my cycles started getting shorter. I was a woman who was always by the clock. It was 28 days, like religiously. I never really had to put anything on the calendar because I always knew exactly when. And they started getting shorter, I think down to 26 days, 25 days, those couple of times after we had been given the go ahead that we could start trying again. And I was like, what's wrong now? You know, I've been clockwork. I got the thyroid medicine and now I'm surgery. What in the world? And so I called the fertility doctor and she explained that the shortened cycles could be that my ovarian reserve was low. And basically that's having fewer eggs. So it would, you know, the reserve of my eggs, if it's low, I guess you can have shorter periods. That's just one indicator, which means it's going to be that much harder to conceive. Obviously, if you have less eggs, then the follicles will put forth less, and so there's less opportunity to try to conceive, and that decreases with age. And at this time I was 36 going on 37, so I mean I wasn't I didn't consider myself old, but for the purposes of conceiving they had put me in, you know, the geriatric or whatever the word is they use.
They have it slightly nicer term now, advanced maternal age. So
That's
just
better.
it's a
It
little better
actually
than
read
geriatric.
on my chart. I remember seeing the Jerry. I was like, y'all got me labeled as a geriatric. Okay. So after that phone call, when she said, oh, that might be shortened cycles, shortened, you know, ovarian reserve, we might need to get you in and do more testing. And I mean, at this point, I mean, we had been on like a 2-year roller coaster between some miscarriages and waiting and then seeing her and then the surgery and then months. And I was like, I can't handle this anymore. I fell apart. I remember just melting down after that phone call and calling Jason. And I was like, I can't do this roller coaster ride. It's too hard. It's pulling on me. Every time I believe we hit came over an obstacle, you know, there was something else there, whether it's getting through a miscarriage and grief or taking care of the thyroid or taking care of the fibroid. There was another thing and I was just like, I can't handle this. I was like, Lord, where are you? You know, because I remember the word congratulations on your baby, and I'm like, I'm not sitting idly by. I'm trying to exercise faith and saying, having the doctor and everything. So I was like, what's going on? Well, the same friend that had shared those scriptures with me, she had talked a lot about fasting. It was something that she and her husband and family did regularly. It was just part of their faith walk. And you don't necessarily hear of a lot of people doing fasting nowadays. But when the Lord gave his Sermon on the Mount, he said, when you pray, when you fast, not if, when. So I started to realize, oh, this is something that I really probably should be doing just for my own spiritual growth anyway. And so I really was listening to her when she was talking about the fasting. And she gave me a book by Jensen Franklin called Fasting. And I read the book. And it gives guidance about fasting and lots of testimony of people's lives and how they changed because of fasting and that. And so hope began to rise. And I knew that I really needed to have a time where I was very intimate with the Lord and dedicated, because I was beginning to feel lost again. And so Jason and I both decided to do a 21-day Daniel fast. And with fasting, I mean, basically what it is you get your flesh out of the way. So if you imagine that you're you know, a spiritual being that's like a satellite receptor for signals coming in from the Lord. Your flesh is almost like interference, like that tree that's in the way, the storm, whatever that blocks that signal of the Lord to getting into to you. And so with the fasting, what you do is you kind of taking the flesh out of the way, and it allows you to be more tuned in spiritually, and you truly can grow closer to the Lord. So we decided to do that 21-day Daniel fast. And what the Daniel fast is, it's a fast based off of the prophet Daniel's own fasting experiences in Daniel 1 and Daniel 10. And basically you eat fruits and vegetables and no processed foods, no sugars. So you're giving up meats, sweets, and drinks other than water. So we did that for 21 days. And I started that in October of 2015. And right before that, I was watching a program where I learned how to meditate on the presence of the Lord. And so you focus your mind, you kind of drop it down into the center of your body. If you think about your bowels, basically where your emotions, when you feel nervous, that tingly gut feeling, that's innermost being. That's where we experience our emotions. Well, that is also our innermost like heart, really, and that's where Holy Spirit resides. And so I was learning how to drop my focus down into my midsection and focus on the Lord. And for the first time, I actually felt Jesus's presence from within, and could feel his love and his power and forgiveness. And it was extremely empowering. And within a day or two, we started that fast. And so I took that experience into the fast with me, where I was meditating regularly on his presence within, and on those scriptures of Hannah and in Psalms where it's describing God's character. And my faith just began to grow. I remember walking down the hallway in our house thinking, Jesus is amazing. I feel like I could do anything. He is, he's there. Oh my gosh, I'm empowered. This is amazing. So like just the faith walk for my own good, that had nothing to do with conceiving during this fast. It was amazing. I'd never in my life encountered the Lord's presence like that up until that time. And so I was meditating and reciting. And so like midway through the fast, I realized I was journaling. I actually have my journal here. I know you're not videoing, but I can show it to you. All of my handwritten notes over this this time of fasting. And I just have all these descriptions of the Lord dealing with toxic emotions and showing his presence and his love and his forgiveness to me, and how he's with me and that I'm not alone, and just encountering his character. I mean, we read the words on the page about his character, but I was encountering his character during this time. And so I started to ask him about the infertility and about our baby. I was like, Lord, give me guidance. I know that we had this prophetic word. Show me, what is it? What is it? And I started seeing visions after that. I saw an embryo. I saw Jesus holding a baby and handing the baby to me. And when I saw the embryo, I knew it was my embryo. I didn't, there was a spiritual sense that it was not like an adoption scenario, that the embryo I saw was mine, and the baby was Jesus showing it to me, And so I just kept standing and with what the Lord had spoken over us prophetically, and what I began to see during this time. And at the end of those 21 days of the fast, we began to eat normally again, which it says with Hannah's story, and she ate. And a few days later, my period was late. I actually wrote it in my diary journal here. And 2 days later, I noticed it was late. And so I continued to wait and pray and ask the Lord when to test. And by the 7th day that it was late, I got confirmation through a dream that it was time for me to test. And so 7 days after the fast had ended, so we were on day 28, basically, of between the start of the fast and when I go to test. And I knew on my way to the store that the answer was going to be pregnant. My faith was just come, off of that fast. I was over the moon. And so sure enough, I took the test, and the answer was pregnant. And so I was like, oh Lord, thank you. It was a humbling experience, because not only, I'd already experienced the excitement because I knew before the test. Does that make sense? Like with what the Lord had been growing in me, that faith was excitement. But surprisingly, when I read the word pregnant, I felt humbled, because it was such an honor to go through this journey with the Lord like I had never experienced in my entire life. And I was like, oh, Lord, you just let me see you and experience you. And now this, and it was just like a gift at the end, in addition to what I'd already experienced. So I, that was the story of our first daughter's conception and the journey that we went on just to conceive her and experience that joy.
I don't think God ever brings us through something to cause us pain or sorrow. He's a good father. He's a loving
Yeah.
father.
Yes.
I think he allows you to go through these things to draw closer to him. And I think that testimony of conceiving your first daughter is so true to that, that he brought you here through that for you to lean on him, rely on him, experience him and his goodness and his character, and give him the glory. So I love that. I've heard majority of that before, but it still just gave me chills all over again just listening to that.
And this is something else I'm going to add to what you just said. I will never believe that he put the fibroid there. I'll never believe that my thyroid issue was because of him, that the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And those are obstacles that were brought into my flesh because we live in a fallen world, and we consume things that are tainted because of our fallen world. The enemy tries to kill, steal, and destroy. And those are the things that were the obstacles that the enemy put there. But the Lord is a healing God. And what I got to see was, in spite of what the enemy was trying to steal from us, the Lord came in his faithfulness and was able to, I wouldn't say fill our quiver with the one, conception at this point, but I could see his goodness and who he is, because it says in scripture that children are a blessing and they are a reward, and you see that how much Jesus loved children. And so that's God's heart, not the fibroid, not the infertility. Although in those struggles, we can remember Romans 8:28, where God works all things for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. It doesn't say that all things are good. It says that he works them for our good. So basically, all those struggles that Jason and I went through, including the separation, which was my doing, coupled with what the enemy had been filtering into my mind all of these years, and I had made choices and needed to be held accountable to my choices and what I was doing. The Lord was faithful, calling me back to him, calling me, calling me, calling me. I surrendered. Our marriage was healed. He healed us. And then we found that we have a prophetic word over our baby. The enemy's trying to steal that. We have a miscarriage. It's the second one I have, fibroid. But the Lord continues to draw me closer to him and remind me of who he is during that process.
What the enemy meant for evil, he will work for good. And I think that's so true, and your testimony speaks to that as well.
Yeah. And during that pregnancy, I continued my dependence strongly on him, because I remembered those prayers of please never another miscarriage. The difference was I wasn't afraid of another miscarriage. I remembered the prayer because my faith was high, and I was saying, Lord, I believe you're going to be faithful. And so I just continued to lean on, Lord, I'm believing this is the child, that it was congratulations for your baby. Every milestone, we got 8 weeks, and I've got the dates, written down. 8-week ultrasound, 12-week heartbeat, 16-week heartbeat, 20-week ultrasound. I mean, I'm documenting everything because of the prior experience, but it just continued to grow. And I remember feeling so strong during this pregnancy, not in my own strength. My strength was coming from my faith in the Lord. I was leaning on him, going, Lord, I just know that this is that baby. I know that I know that I know this is that baby. And so I was just walking in this strength that he was giving me, that I was. And then we did have to have a C-section for her. We were scheduled at 39 weeks to have a C-section because of the fibroid surgery. And it was scheduled for noon on July 20th of 2016. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, she woke me up because my water broke.
She had other plans.
Yes. But also there was a placental abruption. I started bleeding. And it was a lot. And I was like, all right, Lord, she's 39 weeks. And this is not, the enemy's not doing this to me, again. So we went straight to the hospital and they examined, and I was shaken. Okay. When you have an experience, at 39 weeks that you have a baby in there. There's no assumption that it's a few cells. It's a baby. I've been feeling her fluttering. I have been feeling her hiccuping. By the way, this child to this day is a terrible hiccuper. She hiccuped the whole time she was in vitro, just about. But I would feel her hiccuping, kicking, fluttering, moving. She's a baby. And all I could think about was, oh my gosh, this is not happening, the enemy. And I just kept saying, Lord, this is in your hands. This is in your hands. She's in your hands. She's in your hands. And so they went ahead and did the C-section instead of, noon that day. She was born around like 3 o'clock in the morning on the 20th. Perfectly healthy, everything fine. And it was just such a shocking experience. With a C-section, you don't go through it. I mean, I felt some pressure down there and everything, but it's not like you're going through labor pains or anything. I had felt some pressure, but you don't have a baby 1 minute, and literally like the next minute your baby's and so it's like really fast. So emotionally, I didn't get to register. And I remember again that anal type A kind of personality. I'm asking Jason, what's the APGAR score? What does she look like? Da, 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 check off all the boxes. And so then it wasn't until the next day I remember sitting in the room with her in the little bassinet, the hospital bassinet. And Jason was showering. So I was in there by myself, just staring at her. And that's when it hit me what a miracle children are and the gift that she was. And I just started bawling. The tears just came. They just came. And I just was just awed over our God. Just amazing.
And his faithfulness
The
and his
whole
love.
thing.
Yeah.
How his creative ability, the power of being. We don't create children. He does, like our bodies do it through a molecular process, but it is not as if I'm in there directing it. That information was put there by our creator God. And the fact that he carries it through to the end, and you see this child, it just blew me. The whole thing, it was like mind blowing, and it just hit me. And that's when I was hit by that. So she was perfectly healthy, everything good. We have used biblical parenting principles to help her to grow as a young lady and help in our parenting. And I nursed her for 7 months thereabouts, and decided to wean her so that we could try again. Because at that time, I was, I think, 38 when I needed to get on that wagon again. And the goal was, can we have these kids before mommy is 40? I was already the Jerry mom. So I thought, let's try to get back. So I weaned her, and we got on and started trying again. And we had a couple of months of failures again, which is just sad. I mean, even though we had a daughter already, just going through the process and having the failings again, but then the Lord tapped me on the shoulder and reminded me, check out your thyroid. So I had been off of that thyroid medication, and since the middle of Greer's pregnancy, I didn't have to stay on it the whole time. Once, I think about 60 weeks, I talked to or not 60, my gosh, I would be really ready for the baby to come out at that point, right?
That would be
60
the
weeks.
longest pregnancy in
That's not,
history.
I think there are some mammals that might have a super long gestation, but thank the Lord he's merciful that ours is only 40 weeks. But no, this was maybe around the 20-week time mark that my doctor said I could probably cease taking the thyroid. So I got off of it and hadn't been on it. So when we decided to try again with Grayton, I wasn't on it. And I was getting all discouraged again. And I was like, what in the world? I can't go through this again. And I'm not kidding. It was like 1 minute I'm in despair. And the next minute, Holy Spirit's like, boop, don't forget, you did this last time. So I called my doctor and he said, sure, we'll get you on it. The next month we conceived. So I was like, wow, that's amazing, Lord. Thank you so much for that reminder.
Yeah, that is amazing. I didn't know that part. I didn't remember that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a little detail that it's not like I would tell everybody. Greer's saga was huge because it was this big leap, with Grayton. There was still moments where we saw the Lord, and that was one of them. And that pregnancy was much harder. Greer was one I felt really strong, and felt pretty good. It was literally a textbook pregnancy, with the exception of that placental abruption at the end. With Grayton, I was sick, terribly, terribly sick, like much worse than I was with Greer. And I actually had to go on some medication to help me because I couldn't function. I felt so ill. And Jason, this is another God thing. During the time, like, he had always worked on site as an environmental manager at a manufacturing facility. And I think maybe a handful of months before we got pregnant with Grayton, he was offered a position to where he was going to be the environmental audit manager for their entire US operations. And so could work from home because it's over the entire US. So it's not like he needed to have the specific location. And so he worked virtually, and he would travel a few times a month. But when he was home, he worked from home. And I get pregnant with Grayton, and I'm so sick that I can't function in a time when Jason is able to work from home every day, with the exception of his travel.
That's a blessing in his perfect timing.
Yes. I mean, I
No,
was like,
no other way could orchestrate that except him.
no. And I would say that he did that for about a year before he actually went back to be an environmental manager at the site. And it was the exact time, that I needed him there for that thing. And I remember when we prayed over that decision and what to do and all of this stuff, the Lord just was so faithful with having his presence. But here's another thing. His company like downsized or was doing some changes. And the role that he was in before he took that audit manager role, like a few months later, he was told that if he wanted to come back as an environmental manager when he was still at the plant, they would have put him at some other plant. It was this weird management role that made no sense. That means that if he wanted to stay at the company, had he not moved into that audit position, he would have had to have gone to another plant in like a different state. And we were like, that's crazy. Well, God, thank goodness you were in that, role. So it didn't put you out of the qualifications to come back to the local plant. And then the other thing is, then they cut all of the other positions like a few months after that. So like if he'd have stayed in that role, he wouldn't have had a job. And so it was like, whoa, man, Lord, you protected the location, you protected his job, and you gave me the ability to have someone there to help me when I'm at my sickest, when I'm almost immobile.
His hand was over it all and protection over you.
Absolutely. And I mean, it was just, we were just praying and seeking and so Jason faithfully would do what the Lord impressed upon his heart. And in this case, we were like, there's no question after the fact, when you look back, that was the right decision because it protected everything else. And so we were so very thankful for that. And, Jason has come through many other job experiences since then that have just, again, shown the Lord's hand on everything. So we grew our journey from our reconciliation through the miscarriages, through the infertility, through the job changes, through COVID to where we are now. I mean, the Lord has just continued to show his faithfulness.
And I think part of that is because you give God the glory. You give him the glory, and he can entrust this position that he's given you to share your testimony. I texted you this morning that while I was praying this morning over us recording this today, God made it so known to me that he has an anointing over you. And I said earlier how much your testimony has helped me, and I know it's helped so many others, and I know it's going to continue to. That's because you share that testimony. God gives and entrusts things to those that he knows is going to use them for his glory. And I think that's your story shows there was a lot of heartache and a lot of loss, and a lot of troubles, but everything turned out for his good. So I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast and sharing that. And I've been encouraged, and my faith has grown so much every time I hear it. And I know other women are going to feel the same and have their faith increased. So thank you so much, Jennifer.
Oh, you're welcome. It's an honor. I mean, that's the whole reason why Jason and I tell our story, is to let people know. I mean, everything that has happened to us is a prophetic sign to anyone out there who is struggling with their marriage, with infertility, with pregnancy, with parenting, because we've leaned on the Lord with our parenting. And so every step of the story that you've heard today, that you've heard triumph and faithfulness of the Lord, is a prophetic sign to you who are listening, who are struggling and need something to hold on to. The Lord is not a respecter of persons. He loves each and every one of us the same. There's nothing that we can do to earn more love or favor in the sense of just what he's innately has for us. And so he loves us all greatly, immeasurably, unconditionally. And what he has done for me, he can do for you. So let your faith grow. Meditate on the scriptures. Speak those words over yourself, and do not let the enemy steal your miracle, because it's just around the corner. You don't have any idea the great things that the Lord has planned for you, but they are great and they are wonderful and they will glorify him.
Yeah, so all the listeners who may be struggling in their marriage or trying to get pregnant, just like Jen said, God is no respecter of person. So take Jen's testimony and claim it for your own.
Yeah.
So Jen, I would love for those who are interested to be able to find you. So could you give Facebook handle or where they can find you best?
Yes. We are on our ministry. Our marriage ministry is called Goins, the number 4 family, because there are 4 of us and we're 4 families. So we're going for the family. So that's kind of what the Lord gave us for
I
our
love
ministry.
it.
Goins for family, GOINS, number 4 family. And that's how you can find us on Facebook. And we will be getting our website up and running as well, www.goinsforfamily.com, soon. We're still tweaking it just a bit before we actually have it up, but it'll be announced through social media. So there we are.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I'll include all that in the show notes as well. Thank you, Jen, again. And thank you, listeners, for joining us today on For This Child I Have Prayed. Be sure to like and follow along for new episodes every Wednesday. Thank you so much. And I'll
Thank
see you next
you.
time.